to Ethical Chocolate, Where Does Your Chocolate Come From? My name is Fern Wolkin, and I'm moderating this presentation. First, a little housekeeping. So again, please introduce yourself in the chat box and make your comments there as we go along. Please add questions you may have for the presenters, which we will hopefully have time for later. And please keep your microphones muted so that we don't have any interference. In a few minutes, I'm going to introduce our speakers, but first I'd like to have a short primer on labor trafficking in general. So what is labor trafficking? The driving force behind labor trafficking is money. It's the fastest growing and second largest crime globally, second only to drug trafficking and equal in scope to arms and gun trafficking. Labor trafficking often involves children. It always involves force, fraud, or coercion. It's also a booming global industry. An estimated 25 million people are trafficked worldwide on any given day. 75% of victims are women and children, and 81% of cases involve forced labor. Sex trafficking, though perhaps more widely known, makes up just 19% of cases. In total, human trafficking makes around $150 billion a year in global profits. So now on to the cocoa industry specifically. I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute and try to imagine the laborers processing cocoa beans. The bean pods are about the size of a football. They grow out of the trunk of the tree. The trees are very tall and require long poles to reach some of the higher pods. The pods are cut open by machetes to get at the beans. Toxic insecticides are used in the process. The laborers work many long hours, sometimes as many as 12 hours a day. Now open your eyes. So probably none of you imagined an 8-year-old child doing this work, but we have 3 speakers today who are going to speak to you tonight about child labor in the chocolate industry from different perspectives. I'd like you to watch this 2-minute video clip to get the flavor of the chocolate industry. Gabby? Gabby, are you there? Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
The Ivory Coast is the world's largest cocoa producer. But rumors abound about child labor and the trafficking of children. Since 2003, NJCAHT has tried to stop trafficking of children. In 2008 and 2009, he rescued over 150 children. His list includes children aged 7, children from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Bon, souvent wati dono srana onye obo jigika dauma amfana bota ga to bla.
Did you want to go to work in the cocoa plantation?
Naga kawali. Ni bana kiti baraka drobi bugo. So ni smala talife. Wiki bugo.
A child from Burkina Faso can be bought for 230 euros. The price includes transport and indefinite use of the child.
There's still no logo saying child labour free on the leading brands.
So it's in our interest as consumers to speak up about that and try and get as much traceability and transparency in any supply chain that we're interested in.
This Easter, we'll eat our way through 80 million chocolate eggs.
buying a fair trade chocolate, you can feel reassured that it's come from organised groups of farmers who are doing everything in their power to tackle the problems of child labour.
Thanks, Gabby. Okay, great. So that's pretty disturbing video. And tonight we're going to talk about forced labor in the cocoa industry. Cocoa or cacao are the beans from which we get our chocolate products. All these delicious candy hearts for Valentine's Day and bunnies and eggs to fill our Easter baskets. These delectable products come at a cost. Not just the money we spend for it, but the productive lives that are stolen because of it. I have three distinguished guests tonight: Charlotte Tate from greenamerica.org, Susan Sklar from Equal Exchange, and Terrence Collingsworth from International Rights Advocates, who are going to explain to us what forced labor means in the cocoa industry, why it matters, what they're doing about it, and what we, the public, can do to help put an end to it. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Charlotte Tate. Charlotte is the Labor Justice Campaigns Director at Green America. Her work is centered at the intersection of environmental and labor rights, focused on apparel, cocoa, and online retailers. At Green America, she works to mobilize U.S. consumers to advance environmental and human rights solutions throughout supply chains. Charlotte's going to give us an overview of labor trafficking in the cocoa industry. So thank you, Charlotte, for being here. And you can feel free to share your screen as you're ready.
Thanks, Fern. Let me pull up my presentation. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as Fern mentioned, my name is Charlotte Tate. I'm the Labor Justice Campaigns Director at Green America, and today I'm going to be talking to you about our campaign End Child Labor in Cocoa. So first, I wanted to start off with a little bit of background about Green America and our cocoa work. So Green America's mission is to harness economic power, the strength of consumers, investors, businesses, and the marketplace to create a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. Our campaigns focus on labor, food, finance, and climate. We provide alternative purchasing options and individual actions for people to take to hold corporations accountable. In 2010, Green America launched our Raise the Bar campaign, demanding that Hershey take steps to address the issue of child labor in its supply chain. And currently, we're asking the world's largest chocolate companies to step it up on child labor, farmer income, deforestation, reduction of pesticides, and traceability and transparency. So today I'm going to be talking to you about child labor in the cocoa industry. So I just want to start off with a quick definition so we're all on the same page. So child labor is work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and it is harmful to the physical and mental development of the child. So within the cocoa industry, it's estimated that there's 1.5 million child laborers in cocoa growing areas of Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. And a majority of the world's cocoa comes from Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Additionally, 95% of child laborers experience hazardous child labor. So this can include exposure to hazardous chemicals, using dangerous tools, carrying heavy loads, or not having the necessary protective equipment. And in the past decade, a recent study found that exposure to hazardous agrochemicals has increased fivefold in the last decade. This could have big implications for the health of children, for the health of communities, and for the soil that cocoa is grown in. Of the children surveyed in a recent study carried out by the University of Chicago and funded by the Department of Labor, it found that more than 40% of children reported feeling very tired or exhausted because of child labor. 1/3 of children were in very bad pain. 1/4 felt very sick. And 1/10 of children had to receive treatment at a medical center. So clearly, child labor in the cocoa industry is taking a huge toll on children. It's impacting their health and impacting their futures. So I just want to touch briefly on human trafficking in cocoa. I think our other presentations will go into it a little bit more. So a 2018 study conducted by Tulane and Walk Free Foundation estimates that 0.42% of adults in cocoa experience forced labor and 0.17% of children are forced to work. So these may not seem like very big numbers, but there are millions of people working in the cocoa industry, and this would amount to thousands of people. A study conducted by Verite also found that migrant workers may experience deception and debt during the recruitment process, and that wages are very low for adult workers. So this could be combined with deductions and result in very little or no pay. So one of the key issues with child labor in cocoa is that chocolate is just too cheap, and cocoa farmers are not paid enough for their work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about farmer poverty. Only 9% of cocoa farmers earn a living income. So that means the vast majority of cocoa farmers are not even earning a living income. In 2016, 2017, the price of cocoa crashed. This resulted in cocoa farmers' income dropping by as much as 40%. So they were already not making nearly enough, and then their income decreased. On average, cocoa farmers make less than $1 a day. Female cocoa farmers on average make roughly 30 cents per day. So this is below the global poverty line. And the bottom line is that cocoa is just too cheap. But where does all the money go? So the chocolate industry is a $100 billion a year industry. A vast majority of the profits go to the corporations at the top of the supply chain. Cocoa farmers earn only an estimated 6% of the chocolate bar, while manufacturers and retailers get 80%. So clearly the share of profits within the cocoa supply chain is not fair. And this is one of the key drivers of child labor within the cocoa industry. So one child labor is one too many. We are hoping that through advocacy and all the work that so many groups are doing, that we can end child labor in the cocoa industry. So this year, Green America, together with National Wildlife Federation, NJCAHT Network, Mighty Earth, and Be Slavery Free, surveyed 31 of the world's largest chocolate companies, manufacturers, and traders on 6 key issues facing the cocoa industry. So those issues were due diligence, traceability and transparency, living income, child labor, deforestation and climate, agroforestry. So I just want to note before we go any further that we weren't able to include all of the small chocolate companies that are doing amazing work. And the main focus of the scorecard was to push the biggest chocolate companies forward on these various issues. So one thing that was clear through reading the survey responses and doing the grading is that big chocolate companies are not doing nearly enough on really any of these issues. So together with allies, we're calling on companies to do 5 key things. Pay cocoa farmers a living income within the next 5 years, scale up child labor monitoring and remediation systems to 100% of the cocoa supply chains and prevent child labor, increase transparency and traceability, which is a key step because if corporations don't know where their cocoa is being grown, where it's coming from, it would be terribly difficult to address things like child labor in your supply chain if you have no idea where the cocoa is coming from. To end deforestation and engage in a rapid and large-scale reduction in pesticide usage. So the good news is there's a lot you can do as a consumer, as an individual, and you have a lot of power to shift the markets. So one thing you can do is sign petitions. So I'll drop our petition in the chat once I'm done presenting. And another thing you can do is reach out to companies directly. We found through our campaigns, when consumers speak, even the largest companies listen. You can write letters, you can contact them through their contact us page, or you can call the companies. And I'll drop something in the chat for tips for writing a letter to a corporation. And then finally, you can use your purchasing power to shift market demands. So one way to reform the industry is by buying from small chocolate companies working to end child labor. So we have a list of small chocolate companies that we would recommend if you want to not purchase from the big chocolate companies. So that includes Equal Exchange, who's here with us today, Alter Eco, Beyond Good, Divine Chocolate, Endangered Species, Theo, and Tony's Chocolonely. So all of these chocolate companies have the option to buy online, and I will drop a resource in the chat that talks about how each of these companies are working to reform the industry. So that is all from me.
That's great, Charlotte. So I think our tech person has all your links and is gonna, or has already put them in the chat box, so you could just look for that. And we were going to also put the petition back in at the end so that people can, you know, go to that at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. And you know, there's so much to think about when you think about these children that are being trafficked and what they're suffering, and try to think about the things that we can do. So obviously fair trade is one of the ways to work at solving this problem. So our next guest, sorry, one second. Give me 1 second. Our next guest is Susan Sklar. As Charlotte mentioned, so free trade is a good way to work on this. Susan is from Equal Exchange, a fair trade chocolate company. She's been a worker owner at Equal Exchange for 17 years, and she's served as the interfaith team manager. Over the years, she's worked as an educator, writer, organizer, and administrator. So I will share my screen now to share. Bear with me 1 second. Oops. And get you up here. And I think we're good to go. Can you see that?
Good, yes. Thank you, Fern. Can everyone see? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Sklar again. And I'm going to spend some time before we advance the slides. I want to talk about this model of non-exploitative trade that we also call fair trade. And I want to give you some background as to why it was started and where it came from, because it's a very strong model for countering exploitation in the cacao industry, in the coffee industry, in many different agricultural sectors in the world. So Equal Exchange was founded in 1986 as the first fair trade organization in the United States. And we have been, our mission is to help to eliminate systemic poverty and exploitation of the poor and vulnerable people. We're part of a solidarity economics movement, but where did this idea come from? So this is an old idea. We're 35 years old. So the fair trade system was started by progressives who worked in Latin America with priests to help form a more equitable system of economics. And the European fair trade system was trying to reconceptualize a new economics, which addressed the working class and poor who were left behind and are still left behind. And so Equal Exchange emerged along with many organizations out of the European model. And so this was all taking place in the 80s. There was a solidarity movement that was started by the leaders of the Catholic Church in Latin America. And it was an idea that was rooted in something that's called liberation theology, a philosophy advanced by clergy to feed and care for the poor. So a growing number of groups and workers who had been excluded from the mainstream economic system were going deeper into debt and starving. And again, that is still happening today. Grassroots Christian leaders devoted to helping poor people saw a need to strengthen locally rooted ways to make basic survival needs for local families in the community and to help poor people. So some examples of innovations that emerged from this time period are community associations, mutual aid organizations, and savings and loan organizations. So then in Europe and the US in the 60s and 70s, due to a growing dissatisfaction with the culture of the dominant market economy, a more privileged group of middle-class people created countercultural structures, and some of those were cooperatives. So that was cooperative childcare, healthcare, housing groups. They came of age in the 80s. Many of you probably remember that. These new models were happening at the same time as the US movement against the war in Vietnam, against militarization, and there was a new awareness about the destruction of the environment at that time. So all of these things were converging. So a larger movement started forming, which solidified in the 90s. And international and regional movements were learning from each other and starting to join forces to create more democratic alternatives to existing market structures. So many food co-ops were established during this period, and food co-ops, along with faith-based groups, were the first groups that really helped to launch equal exchange and get it started. Okay, so next slide, please. That's the history, just so you know where we're coming from.
Uh-oh. Why is it not going forward? Ah, there we go.
Here we go. Yeah, so we're 35 years old. There are about 120 members in our co-op. We were structured as a worker-owned co-op from the very beginning. So each worker is a co-owner of the business and has one vote, regardless of their position. And we operate at a modest 2 to 5% target profit margin, proving that a mission-driven business model can be sustainable and replicable. And we're trying to show that transactions don't have to be either purely charitable or exploitative to be successful. Third slide, please. So we work with democratically run farmer cooperatives. We work with 40 small farm co-ops in 20 countries. What's a small farmer, you ask? A small farmer usually will farm a plot of 2 to 5 hectares, or approximately 12 acres of land or less. They're small business people. And the challenges include remoteness. Many of these agricultural products like coffee and cacao are grown on at high altitudes on mountains. Expensive equipment is also another barrier. And a lot of the products that Equal Exchange started out with and still carry cannot be grown in the US. So this is a map that shows you all the different places where you can find our products. Next slide, please. So this is our mission. And we're not only trying to change the way that trade is done in the world, we're also trying to eliminate systemic poverty and exploitation, working against racism and gender equality. So, and our model also works to promote stewardship of the earth through organic and sustainable agricultural practices. Next slide, please. So these are some of the principles that we adhere to: buying products directly from small farmers, guaranteeing an above market price and pre-harvest credit. So before the money comes in from the sale, the co-op is guaranteed credit so that people can start their cleaning and planting for the next year and preparing for the next year. And also additional premiums for fair trade above and beyond the price, and for organic, which can be used for different community facilities or things that are needed, such as computers or trucks. Supporting democratic farmer cooperatives, giving farmers a voice in trade and an access to markets, long-term trade relationships. And we visit co-ops. Before COVID, we visited co-ops quite often, every year at least, with other groups visiting every 2 or 3 years, different delegations visiting as well, and members of our co-op visiting farmer co-ops. Next slide, please. So this is a model that supports human rights in farming and production. It's an alternative model. No child labor or forced labor of any kind is permitted, is accepted. Farmers use their voices in democratically run cooperatives. And there's a commitment to gender equity. So women are encouraged to participate. Of course, it's not perfect, but there is a commitment to this in the co-ops that we work with. There's safe working conditions for all. And again, a fair price for products and premiums so that farmers can stay on their land. Next slide, please. So this is also a model that does not exploit the earth. So it safeguards and restores the environment. So you have organic agriculture, which avoids chemical fertilizers and toxic pesticides. There's no clear cutting, and there's shade grown coffee. There's no clear cutting, there are no monocrops. It's shade grown coffee and cacao, etc. And then there's a natural soil enhancement with living organism and nutrients instead of toxic chemicals. Next slide, please. So climate action, there's climate action involved in fair trade farming. So this type of farming halts deforestation. It mitigates against soil erosion and mudslides, restores forests, it protects wildlife habitats, keeps balance of birds and insects, it conserves water, and it meets farmers' needs for income so that they don't have to migrate to the city or to some other place outside of their country and their farm. Next, please. So when we talk about exploitation, it's important to realize that small farmers are easy prey for corporations, for big business. Small farmers, males, females, children are all easy prey. So they are just, they are at the mercy of these large corporations that come in and demand payment at a certain time. They don't have a lot of alternatives. Next slide, please. So here's a diagram of what the conventional coffee system looks like, basically. And there's a lot of players involved, and they're all taking their cuts. So you start off at the top either with a plantation where, you know, workers aren't receiving a lot of money from the get-go, and they've probably been there for generations and can't leave, and their kids can't get educated. Or you start with small businessmen and women, small farmers. And then you can see, you know, that the products have to go to a mill, and they take a cut. There's an intermediary or agent that's arranging all of these interactions. There's often a private exporter. And then from there, after it's been milled, this is actually dealing more with coffee, but it's the same principle. The coffee beans will go to an importer or a broker, and then to a roaster, because they need to be roasted, and then there'll be traders and brokers involved, taking money every step of the way. Eventually, the finished roasted product will get to a distributor, and then from there it goes to a retail outlet, a restaurant, and a cafe, and there, finally you buy it, and it's in your cup. So you can see all of the various players that are part of this, taking the money. The farmer ends up with very little money and can't even stay in business. Next slide, please. So the fair trade system really tries to cut through all of this, make it more direct supply chain. So there, you start with a small farmer co-op, democratically organized co-ops, where everyone has a voice. There's often a co-op mill, a mill that is controlled by the workers, and they run it and they make sure that it's functioning properly, and that they're doing what, you know, they're using the correct procedures. It will then go to a co-op roaster. So the co-op is involved in all of this. And then eventually it ends up at a co-op market, a restaurant or cafe, or another store, an independent store in the United States, or it's distributed by a community of faith after services or at a holiday bazaar. And we have 13 different faith-based partnerships at Equal Exchange, and then it finally gets to somebody's cup. So that this process really changes the way that farmers are treated and that farmers, you know, are compensated, and it's quite different. Next slide, please. So it provides a market access to farmers. It establishes dignified, respectful, egalitarian relationships. It helps to spread consumer education and to change purchasing practices. There's information about all of our products on the boxes and bags and wrappers in the case of chocolate. It builds international networks and solidarity, going back to solidarity again, and it transforms the conventional model of trade so that it's not exploitative. Next slide, please. So we just heard from Charlotte about the horrific conditions where laborers are working in the cacao industry. And again, it's the demand for cheap chocolate that results in low wages for workers. The lack of transparency in corporate cacao sourcing, industry consolidation, geopolitical issues all contribute to the problem. And but fair trade is different. Equal Exchange purchases cacao from cooperatives in the Dominican Republic, Peru, Panama, and Togo. And these co-ops get, it allows farmers to get market access who wouldn't otherwise have it. And so it's a very, very different kind of system. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of some farmers who are in a facility where they're weighing their beans. A jointly owned facility, and people have a stake in their business. They share resources instead of all needing to buy their own equipment, which could be computers, scales, trucks, drying racks in the case of cacao. And they share agronomy information to increase productivity and to achieve better quality. Beans are collected from farmers and processed in the cooperative during they're dried, they're fermented together, they're dried together in bins. So it's a much more cooperative process. Next slide, please. This is just an example of a water pump that was built by a community through its fair trade premiums. Every cooperative will decide what it needs, what extra, whether it's a medical clinic or some infrastructure, or if some extreme weather event has washed out a road and they need to rebuild the road, they can use that money, the fair trade extra premiums, for rebuilding and refurbishing. Next slide, please. So how can you support small scale farmers and this non-exploitative model? Just, keep asking questions about where you're sourcing your various products and your cacao, your chocolate. Know the best corporate responsibility certifications, educate other people, and just keep talking about it, because not enough people know about fair trade. Next slide, please. These are just some of the products that other products that Equal Exchange represents and sells. And so we encourage you to buy our products or other fairly traded, authentically fairly traded products. You can also become a citizen consumer at Equal Exchange. Join our group, learn more at monthly meetings. We have a summit every year where we have different campaigns, and we try to make people aware of an alternative economic supply chain. We'd love to have you more involved. If you are interested in getting involved, and put your name in the chat, I will make sure that you get some follow-up information about how you can become a citizen consumer at Equal Exchange. But that is my presentation for tonight.
Susan, thank you so much. A couple of things leaped out at me. One is that Equal Exchange and fair trade businesses like yours focus on the people at the, I guess you would, not sure if you call it the base of the supply chain, but the farmers, the people who are producing the product, rather than the big companies that, you know, everybody thinks somehow magically the chocolate appears. I think we can see that in your diagrams of the supply chains. You don't even have to read them. You could just look at them side by side and see the big difference between the two. So we are putting your equal exchange links in the chat box for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So our next guest has a very interesting and unique view on this problem. I'd like to welcome Terrence Collingsworth. Terry is the founder and executive director of the International Rights Advocates. He's been practicing law in the United States for over 35 years, and for the last 25 has specialized in international human rights litigation. He's worked all over the world addressing a wide range of human rights issues. He has recently focused on cases preventing multinational companies from violating the human rights of children who are forced by poverty and other factors to work in global supply chains. He will discuss his recent cases on forced child labor and trafficking in the cocoa supply chains in Côte d'Ivoire. Terry, thank you for coming, and you can share your screen as you like.
Thanks very much. Really happy to be here. Uh-oh, I'm gonna have to start all over here.
That's okay. We're actually really good on time, so. If you go to from the beginning, you should. Oh, I lost your sound. Can you unmute, Terry?
This.
That's better. Okay. If you go to from the beginning, oh, slideshow. I think you should. You're all okay. Okay, if you just slide your arrow to the left where it says from beginning, I think that should, we'll go back to slideshow.
Problem is this bar telling me about who's on is in the way.
Oh.
Terry, if you go to the bottom of your PowerPoint window, there's a little box that looks like a presentation thing you would pull down, kind of next to the 100% bar. Do you see that?
I'm sorry, please try again.
Yeah, so if you go to the bottom of the PowerPoint window, see where it says like 100% plus or minus?
Yes.
If you go to that thing to the left, that looks like a slide that you would pull down. Sorry, I don't have the word for it. It'll just move your mouse to the left.
Yes.
Back to the right, that little button, keep going. One more. There, that will start it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As noted, I've been a lawyer for about 35 years, and I never ever claimed to know how to do this stuff. So here we go. Well, first of all, I really appreciate Charlotte and Susan's presentations because they're kind of optimistic. They're talking about what people are doing that are going to help solve the problem and make consumers more aware, et cetera. My presentation is what we've been doing for literally 20 years to try to get the big corporations like Nestle, Cargill, Berry, Callebaut, Mars, and Hershey to stop enslaving children and keep their promises really that they've made to consumers. So I'm going to talk about what we've been doing there and what progress we're making and what people can do to help. So beginning in the 1990s, there was still a major and dangerous civil conflict going on in Côte d'Ivoire, and it was difficult to get information. But by the late 90s, people were able to get in there again and start documenting what had been going on in the cocoa sector, which continued to function throughout the civil conflict. We sent a team of researchers in 1999 and an excellent photographer, Robin Romano, who took most of the iconic pictures in the early days of Coco slaves. He's unfortunately passed away a few years back, but so we started going in and trying to just show what was happening with these big companies. These are Robin's pictures that they've been all over the world really, but he's showing, and you've already seen some film clips of just how bad it is. These children are young. Most of the ones that I've personally met are between the ages of 10 and 15, and they do everything. They use sharp instruments, they carry heavy loads. They're always using machetes to cut down, as Fran mentioned, these giant pods and open them up. On my last trip, we came upon a group of children who were trafficked from Burkina Faso, working on a cocoa plantation that we traced back to Cargill. And one of the kids gave me a lesson on how to do this, let me borrow his machete. So I picked up one of these pods and whacked at it. And it really is hard to open one. And it's so dangerous because one miss and you've hacked your arm with a machete. And most of the kids that I've interviewed have done that. They've got scars all over their bodies of machete wounds. And they also are applying pesticides and herbicides with no protection whatsoever. The horrors of child slavery began to be documented. And one of the great sources, in addition to the ones you've already seen here today, Mickey Mastrati has 2 films out, The Dark Side of Chocolate and Shady Chocolate. Again, Robin Romano was the photographer on both of those films. And now Mickey's working on a 3rd film called The Chocolate War, which is really going to be more focused on documenting the efforts we and others have made to hold the companies accountable while they're continuing to use child slaves. Now, from the get-go, I started approaching the companies in about 2000 with our work, our research, and our pictures. And they took the page right out of the multinational playbook. They made the standard claims, oh, we have no control over our suppliers. We just buy the beans and we don't even know how they're harvested. We don't even know where Cote d'Ivoire is. They claimed ignorance, but they would always end by saying, well, but we're strongly opposed to child labor. We just haven't done a thing about it. So in 2001, working with others, but based largely on the photos that Robin took, we went to US Congressman Elliot Engel, and he introduced a bill in the House of Representatives that was co-sponsored by Bernie Sanders, who at that time was on my board before he got too busy to talk to me anymore. And they introduced a law that would have made it illegal to import chocolate harvested by children, and required an independent certification and labeling system to document that you weren't using child labor. Your chocolate had to be essentially slave-free. It passed the House by 291 to 115. So that means even a lot of Republicans, back in the old days at least, thought that child slavery was wrong and that abusing children on cocoa plantations was wrong. And they bucked big business and supported this law. So we thought we were in good shape. We really had a tool to work with. Unfortunately, in the House, where this vote occurred, we caught the industry by surprise. But when we got over to the Senate, they geared up, hired the biggest lobbyists they could, including Bob Dole and Mitchell and a few other big names like that. And by the time they were done, they instead eradicated the bill and gutted it and turned it into a voluntary mechanism, which became known as the Harkin-Engel Protocol in 2001. Nonetheless, in 2001, the Chocolate Manufacturers Association and all of the big companies, Nestle, Cargill, Mars, Hershey, Barry Callebaut, Mondelez, they all signed this protocol. They promised to end child labor in their supply chains by 2005, and they admitted that the worst forms of child labor that are defined in ILO Convention 182 are occurring in their supply chains, and they were going to stop it. So that was a tremendous admission at the time that, okay, we're done denying it. And we're now going to work to end the use of child labor in our supply chains. I'll pause there a minute and say there's some definitional issues, like what's child labor versus worst forms of child labor versus forced child labor versus child slaves. Well, when we're talking about the kinds of hazardous work that meet the definition of the worst forms of child labor, using pesticides, herbicides, and machetes and other sharp tools, child labor that is performing that kind of work is the worst forms of child labor. And as Charlotte mentioned, the NORC report that came out in 2020 found that about 95% of the child labor is the worst forms of child labor, which is illegal under the ILO convention and virtually every domestic legal system. So lately, it's rather surprising that companies are trotting out this line that, well, most of the kids are working for their uncle or their father, and it's just, you know, like a family farm like we used to do in America. That's just not true. Every one of these kids, NORC says 95%, I say 100%. I don't know what job you could do on a cocoa plantation harvesting cocoa that isn't hazardous, but worst forms of child labor is child labor as it occurs, in fact, on the cocoa plantations. Forced child labor or child slavery is when the children are either trafficked and brought against their will to a plantation and then made to work, or they are local, but they are still somehow kidnapped or brought to a plantation and made to work. I disagree strongly with some of the estimates that others have shown that it's a small percentage of the workers who are forced or trafficked. In my own anecdotal experience interviewing hundreds of these kids, I would say it's 50%. The issue is that some of the researchers who are looking to find forced or trafficked child labor, they're not doing a very thorough job of asking the questions. They pretty much say, well, why are you here? And the kid says, oh, I'm 15 and that's my uncle. And then they move on. My researchers sit and talk to that kid for an hour and eventually get them to tell the truth, because they can tell their dialect isn't right. They're not from around there. And we have found, I would say again, 50% of the kids that at least we have interviewed, and it was a random sample, are from either Burkina Faso or Mali. But anyways, the cocoa companies agreed to do this. Now in 2001, we were furious, as were all of the activists who worked on this, that our great law got diluted to a voluntary initiative, which, based on my experience, is always a joke. The companies never police themselves and comply with their own voluntary standards. But at the time this occurred, 2001, Tom Harkin was also on my board of directors, and he urged us strongly to give the companies a chance. He said, look, they promised, they signed this initiative, let's wait till 2005 to see how they do. So we sent back this is just quoting some from the protocol, how they committed to stopping the use of child labor. Since then, the cocoa industry has given itself 4 extensions of time. Each time there was no discussion, no debate. They unilaterally extended the time to give themselves to stop using child labor. And so that now their latest extension, which is not reflected here, they extended until 2025. And they're no longer claiming they're going to end child labor. They're going to reduce the worst forms by 70%. Now, if you think about this, this is evil genius. They've given themselves permission legally, essentially, to continue to use child labor, worst forms of child labor, until they stop, until they decide they're able to stop. So when you confront them across all these years, they can say, well, under the protocol, we're working on it. We'll be done maybe in 2025, but we probably will never really stop. We're just going to reduce it by 70%. So that's the attitude and the position of the companies. I will point out that I know personally from my experience that I'm going to talk about suing them, they are spending millions of dollars on lawyers. They are spending millions of dollars on lobbyists and millions of dollars on public relations firms to be able to continue to do this, use child labor in their supply chains for as long as they can. So it must be really valuable to them. As Charlotte pointed out, it is really valuable to them. This is cheap cocoa that they get to keep buying until someone makes them stop. So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this because of this bar up here. There we go. We first sued the cocoa industry, at that time just Nestle, Cargill, and ADM, in 2005. And we did that because we gave them the 5 years. They gave themselves their first extension of time, and then we initiated our lawsuit. We represent, in this first case, 6 former child slaves who were trafficked from Mali. They were forced to work on cocoa plantations for periods of between 3 and 5 years. And when they finally escaped and went back to Mali, I was introduced to them, and we began that case in 2005. We gave them a fair chance. They didn't do it. And I wanted to stress first, before talking about the various cases, that each time we have returned with our researchers to Cote d'Ivoire to see, has there been any progress made? Did these companies do anything in all these years? The answer is absolutely not. I'm going to show a few pictures of my last trip in both March and November of 2019, when was the last time we could safely travel there. These are kids that are around 12. This guy here is a little bit older, that we met in 2019. They were trafficked from Burkina Faso, and they were working on a cocoa plantation that we believe we have traced to Cargill. This kid here in the center, when we first interviewed him, he said he was 15 and that his uncle owned the farm. And my translator and guide was able to talk to him for a few minutes, and then he confessed or admitted that no, he was from Burkina Faso and that he was 12. They were all using their sharp machetes. They're taking a little break here to talk to us. But this is a typical scene that we come across when we're walking through plantations. Again, just randomly, we see a plantation from the road, we go in and see what we can find out. There's that same child who's become sort of my inspiration and poster child, because he just looks so vulnerable, like he's waiting for an answer, like, can you get me out of here? It's just another kid we met. This is a group of kids. This is the first time I saw some girls out there, and they were also using machetes and harvesting cocoa just like everybody else. This is another kid that we met who, by the time we were done, asked me if we could get him out of there, and we reported it to the authorities, but at that time I had no alternative plans for how I could possibly rescue children. That's not what we're equipped for, but it haunts me every day. These kids were all working, and we were able to interview them for quite a while. And then this guy is the overseer, and he suddenly showed up and got very angry, and we had to clear out of there. I'm showing these pictures just because, again, the companies promised in 2001 to stop, and this is 2019, and they didn't. I don't believe we can ever again trust a word they say. And as both Charlotte and Susan noted, that when there is a solution in the future, it cannot be that the companies are going to have some control over who is able to verify whether they are still using child slaves after all of this time, that it has to be an independent system of monitoring and verification by third parties. Yeah, I mentioned that so the kids that I had pictures of, we asked them where the beans went from their plantation, and they pointed to this co-op down the road, and it was a Cargill co-op. It had a Cargill sign on it, Cargill bags everywhere, which is very great evidence for our case against Cargill, which I hope to show a jury someday. So now I'm just going to briefly summarize for as simply as I can, knowing this now, that the companies are willfully violating the law. They've done virtually nothing to stop it. What legal options are there in our system as it exists to try to help the children who are working on these plantations? The first choice we had was the Alien Tort Statute, which was passed in 1789 by our first Congress. So the founding fathers passed, among laws in the first Judiciary Act, something called the Alien Tort Statute. It has exactly 16 words. It says that an alien can sue in tort, which means a personal injury, for violations of the law of nations. Those are the three simple elements: that you have to be an alien, so a non-American, you have to have been injured, and child slavery and the kinds of injuries that the children suffered qualify, and it has to be a law of nations violation, which is universally agreed to be a handful of universal norms that are so offensive and extreme that all civilized countries outlaw them. So the list is pretty short. It is slavery, including child slavery, forced labor, genocide, crimes against humanity, extrajudicial killings, and torture. So that's the limited list. In our case, qualified. Unfortunately, once we filed the case, the corporate community, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, U.S. Council for International Business, they began filing amicus briefs in all of the courts, including the Supreme Court, to try to kill this law. And in our debates with them, I was able to ask, let's list again, let's agree on what that list is: slavery, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, et cetera. Which of those are you not positive your supply chain does not include? Can't you at least look people in the eye and say, we're not worried about that Alien Tort Statute because we're not doing any of those horrible things? No, instead they tried to kill it, and they almost have, to be honest. The Supreme Court has issued two different rulings in recent years at the urging of corporations that have put significant new hurdles in front of our case. They've stated first that you cannot sue in the US courts unless the torts at issue are very closely related to and touch and concern the territory of the United States. That essentially nullifies the law if you have to show that this wrongful act occurred in the United States, because by definition, these are foreign torts and foreign alien plaintiffs. The fact is that the current Supreme Court is very conservative. They granted the corporation's prayers and almost have nullified the statute. Now, my case that's in the Supreme Court now was argued on December 1st, 2020, and the corporations have raised a new argument. They stood up in the Supreme Court on December 1st and said, corporations are immune from international human rights violations, that only individuals can be liable. Now, I could spend 20 minutes talking about what's wrong with that, but I just wanted you to realize that they're still at it. They're standing up in court after promising consumers Harkin-Engel Protocol, the Nestle Cocoa Promise, the Cargill Cocoa Promise. We're going to stop. They're trying to get immunity to continue using child slavery from the US Supreme Court. Even Justice Alito and Thomas, the two most conservative justices on the court, had trouble with that. And I'm hopeful that we're going to win that argument, and we'll find out in May or June. If we win, that case will go back to the trial court and we can finally bring them to justice there. A second option is the Trafficking Victims Protection and Reauthorization Act. It was amended several times and now creates a private right of action for a person to sue a group or an individual that has benefited from forced or trafficked labor. So in this case, which we just filed on February 12, 2021, we represent 8 former child slaves who were again from Mali, trafficked and then forced to work on cocoa plantations in Cote d'Ivoire. They finally escaped and we met them at home. This law is much better suited to supply chain liability because it has only 3 elements. You have to show there was forced or trafficked child labor, and with our plaintiffs who were from Mali, they were trafficked and forced to work, we satisfy that. You have to show that there was a venture, some kind of cooperation between the bad people. And here we have the cocoa companies with their relationships with the plantations, their continuing support for plantations that they know are using forced or trafficked child labor, et cetera. And then last, we have to show that the companies benefit from the forced or child labor. And we have done that. We have a great economist who's going to lay out exactly how much they've benefited by paying farmers so little that they're using children to harvest their cocoa. In all of our cases, we add common law claims, unjust enrichment, which is a great theory that a corporation should have to disgorge unlawful profits, negligent supervision, that they're going there, they're providing skilled labor to oversee the operations, they're providing pesticides, they're providing teaching, they're training the workers, but they're not doing a thing about the child labor that they're supposed to be stopping. And then claims for the emotional distress of the children who have gone through this horrific experience. There's also a law that is the Section 307 of the Trade Act. It's of the Tariff Act of 1930. It had a giant loophole in it for consumptive demand, but Bernie Sanders, when he was then a senator, plugged the hole. And now the law actually allows us to file a petition to ban the importation of chocolate that was harvested by forced child labor. Along with another organization called CAL, Corporate Accountability Lab, we filed a petition last year on February 14th to ban all of the cocoa coming in from Cote d'Ivoire until the companies can demonstrate that they are not using forced child labor. Nothing happened much last year. We still had the Trump administration, but we're optimistic now and have had recent discussions with the folks at Customs and Border Protection who enforce this law. And we hope that we can get some action taken there as well. There's no question that the cocoa is coming in made with forced child labor, and the law says in whole or in part. So we don't have to show that every cocoa bar is infested with chocolate harvested by children. We just have to show that some of it is, and we've done that. And then last, I just have one more slide that I'm very motivated by this, and I just want to remind everyone that this kid is going to continue to, and kids like him are going to continue to be abused in this way until we stop them. So I'm trying to stop them legally. I want to mirror what Charlotte and Susan both have said in different ways, that what consumers can do, particularly with the big companies, is contact them. Tell them you're not going to buy their products until they can actually document and demonstrate that they're no longer, even after they've admitted it in the first instance, using child labor to harvest their cocoa. And on our website, iradvocates.org, we have a card that you can click on, and it gets you right to the contact information for the big companies that we've sued, so that you can tell them that. That's number one. Number two is just to generally, as Charlotte and Susan have said, be a smarter consumer. If you don't know, don't give it the benefit of the doubt. Find out, and if you learn that the company with whatever commodity is not using child labor, then that's fine, go ahead. There are other sources though on chocolate to find good products that have been verified and vetted, and the one that I use, and Charlotte's is also excellent, is slavefreechocolate.org, where there's roughly 30 smaller companies that are recommended there for their chocolate. I will briefly note, because I'm now looking into this and it's fresh in my mind, that although Tony Chocolonely is on Charlotte's list and many people think they're a great company, they're in fact sourcing and using the processing mechanisms of Barry Callebaut, which is one of the worst offenders on the planet of using child labor in Cote d'Ivoire. And we don't think that meets our standard for what is an ethical company to be essentially complicit in what in what Barry Callebaut is doing. But that's just an aside. I encourage you to find the good products, reward those who are doing it right, and by all means, stop rewarding the big companies, Nestle, Cargill, Mars, Hershey, Barry Callebaut, Mondelez, and Olam, that we have evidence are continuing to profit from child slavery. Thank you. Sorry that went on a bit.
That's great, Terry, and we're still good on time. I just want to say a couple of things. I definitely hope you win these lawsuits and hit them in their pocketbooks really, really hard, because I think, that's one way. There are many ways to work on this problem, but that's definitely one that they will hear and understand. And I think it's interesting that they said that you can only sue people, you can't sue corporations. But when it comes to raising money and spending money, corporations are people too. So exactly. I love that. I mean, I love that contradiction. So God, thank you all. I appreciate this so much. I've learned so much. We're gonna go to a Q&A for a little bit. I know there are a lot of questions in the chat box, and Gabby has been looking through them. And so Gabby, if you want to read one of the questions out, and I can kind of ask someone to answer it.
Sure. So the first one was from Nicole. So she, I guess, clarification on if the kids are being forced to work or if they're working to help families because of the poverty, and how come countries are allowed to use child labor to begin with?
So Terry, that sounds like your.
Sure. Well, one of the myths that many companies use to perpetuate their ability to use child slavery is either that it's just after school, there's no harm done. None of the kids that I've ever met are in school. But certainly the trafficked kids, they're not sending any money home because they're not getting paid at all. Their parents don't even know where they are. They were kidnapped. And when they go back home, as one of the questions we all had is, where did their parents think they were? And they didn't know, but they assumed that this had happened, that they got trafficked away. But in terms of just generally speaking, this system, certainly in the cocoa sector, no one is paying any of the workers, even if they're paid, and I didn't meet any that were, they are getting paid so little that it's subsistence slavery. Like they're getting paid barely enough to eat so they can show up the next day to work. There's no change left over to send it back to their family. They're essentially avoiding the need for their parents to feed them by working and not going to school. So it's a very tough choice. In terms of why it goes on, the corruption in Cote d'Ivoire is just notorious. That they're the champions of corruption all the way up the ladder. I was arrested at a bus station in Mali that was the primary hub to traffic kids from Mali to Cote d'Ivoire. It's called Cocos. I had gathered a bunch of kids up to warn them about this practice and to ask them some questions about what they knew, what they didn't know. And within 5 minutes, 2 police officers come up to me and arrest me and my partner and our camera person. And I pointed out that my colleague had identified the traffickers that were out there. He said, there's one, I see, he knows who they are. And so I said to the officer, why don't you arrest the traffickers? They're kidnapping children. And 5 minutes later, we're in the police station and the traffickers are still carrying on. And then they tried to get us to pay them a bribe to let us go when we didn't do anything, and we refused. But it's that simple, that there's no enforcement of law. Now, Cote d'Ivoire is very recently, due to international pressure, making a big show of arresting 2 or 3 traffickers here and there, but it's just a drop in the bucket of what's really going on.
Thanks, Terry. Gabby, another question?
Yes. So the another one was for the enslaved children, how do they get out, or are they enslaved for life? And is there any data on the quality of life after this horrible childhood?
I'm going to put that out there. Charlotte, do you know anything about this that you could?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe this is a question for Terry if you have. Yeah, great.
Sorry, I don't mean to bogart the conversation, but the children I represent in the 2 cases and other children that I've interviewed in Mali after they have escaped, when they first get there, they are taken against their will. They're taken to a plantation in the middle of nowhere of Cote d'Ivoire, where they are told, New Deal, you're going to either work or you're going to starve. Now, the kids have no money. They don't speak the same dialect. They don't know where they are. And they're like 10, 11, and 12, which is really a young age if you think about it. If you picture yourself at 10 or 11 or 12 and you're faced with this choice to work or starve and you don't know where you are, what would you do? Well, almost all of them say, well, I'm going to work until I figure out something else. And it takes most of them 3, 4, 5 years before they're mature enough and angry enough to finally just walk off, knowing that they might not even survive it. But the ones that I've met who have survived it, they stole food from farms as they're walking. They got odd jobs. They begged. They had nothing, so they had to work with nothing to get home. But they did, and who knows how many of them didn't. It's like at our border, we find lots of bodies in the desert of people who were so desperate that they tried to walk across it. Well, these kids are just like that.
So these kids basically, they last for so long and then they escape, hope some successfully and some not. So yeah, that's why there are no adult slaves doing this processing. I guess there's just a constant supply of children.
And children, they're picking children because you can abuse a child. You can make a child do things. But when those kids get about 16 or 15, they're big, they're strong, and they basically say, that's it, I'm not going to do this anymore. We have on our website an article I wrote in a Stanford Law School publication called Just Security, where we have pictures of this and try to document better how that trafficking process works.
I see. Gabby?
Sure. The next one is from Gina. She was wondering how Equal Exchange verifies that participating cocoa farms are complying with the child labor and forced labor policies.
Susan, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I would say that, we visit, we talk to the managers, we talk to the staff at the cooperatives. There's not a particular certification or certifier that we use, but it's a constantly establishing of the relationship, meeting with people at the co-op level, walking around, talking to people, staying over at the co-ops, seeing what the situation is, and feeling confident that that practice is not going on. So again, these are long-term relationships that we have with these co-ops, and meeting people, visiting, talking to people, having free reign in the co-ops to talk to whoever we want. That's what we do.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Gabby, any more questions there?
A few more, yes. So the next one was from Eileen. She wanted to know, how are these farmers protected from the criminal element that might see them as competition and threaten them with physical harm if they don't cooperate with them?
So this is, okay. So this is for me, I guess. They have security. They have, security people who are part of the co-ops, who protect people at the co-ops, who guard at night and, make sure that the co-op is secure. There are different incidents at different times in different countries, but the co-ops take care of their own members.
So Charlotte, I had a question for you. What about buying chocolate from Central or South America? Couldn't the company switch to, or is the same problem, would the same problem be there? And I know, Susan, a lot of your cocoa comes from there. I noticed from your diagram, but Charlotte, do you know about that?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we wouldn't encourage all of the companies to leave West Africa. Instead, we want to encourage companies and governments to take action to reform the industry so that cocoa farmers can make a fair living and not use child laborers, that children can grow up and become successful cocoa farmers and not be worried about making ends meet. So for us, our advocacy focuses on chocolate companies that source out of West Africa, because the West African cocoa industry needs to be reformed, not destroyed by companies leaving West Africa.
Okay, that makes sense. Just looking.
For the most part, Equal Exchange has worked with cacao groups in Dominican Republic, Peru, Panama, Ecuador at one point, and we just added a group in Togo. So Togo is our most recent group. So we were actually glad to be able to find a democratically run co-op that was, following all the fair trade principles in Africa. We just are trying to establish this model where we can and encourage people to buy chocolate from these areas.
Okay, one or two more questions I think we have time for. Terry, I don't know, you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to. It's where do the funds come from to pay for Terry's lawsuits?
That assumes facts not in evidence, really. The fact is we're taking on some of the biggest corporations in the world, and they have unlimited resources, and they hire the giant law firms like Gibson Dunn and Hogan Hartson, or now it's called Hogan Lovells. So we're always resource stretched. We do a couple of things. One, I usually find a good partner that is a for-profit law firm that can cover our costs and staffing issues, of all of the paperwork that you need to file in a big case, so that they can handle those things for us, so that I don't need to pay for staff to do that. And then we have foundation grants, and we get individual donations. And since you've asked, on our website, there is a place to contribute to our cases and to help us in this battle against the giants of the corporate world. At the end of the day, though, we always manage by the grace of God. We figure out how to get things done, and it's never been an issue of affecting the quality of representation. In fact, we're very proud to say that we, with our very small staff, are taking on some of the biggest law firms in the country, and we often win.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I think I'm going to end with, there's one person put in a comment. It's a comment from Diego's Chocolate. It says, here in Guatemala, we do not have any problems with child slave or forced labor. We do have low payments for farm work generally, which we are raising for our farmers by selling origin-made chocolates in the USA. So thank you, Diego's Chocolate. That's great. And now people know that they can go to you for ethical chocolate as well. So I am going to share my screen one more time before we end. Hope everybody can see that. So I wanted to just give everybody some key takeaways before we leave. Most cocoa beans are picked by forced child labor, at least in Africa. Some children as young as 8 years old. This labor is dangerous, as Terry explained to us and showed us, and we saw.
Fern, can you put your screen to full view?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yep. Sorry. Is that better? Yeah, okay. And you can.
It's on presenter view. If you can undo that, that'd be great. Regular view. It's good.
I'm sorry.
Just go back and start from the beginning of the slideshow.
Okay. I'm at the beginning. This is the beginning.
Yeah, but you picked from present current slide. Go back to how you.
No, this is the beginning. Can you see this?
Yeah. Got it now. Perfect.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the labor is dangerous. This is difficult labor for very long hours. And most of these children have never even tasted chocolate. And if you go, actually, if you view some of the YouTube videos and things, you see sometimes they give the child the chocolate and to taste for the very first time after they've been doing this labor, and it's pretty amazing. Steps to take. So as our presenters have told us, oops, sorry, I'm sorry. I can't read this either. Here we go. You can sign the petition that Charlotte has in the chat box, or save it for later and go on, and any other petitions that you find as you're looking into this problem. You can reach out to companies directly when consumers speak. Even the largest companies listen. Use your purchasing power to shift market demand to fair trade. Tell your friends and family and spread the word as we're doing here tonight. And join a coalition committee by going to www.safernj.org or follow us on social media at @ASaferNJ on social media. That's weird. That's my last, not my last slide, but it's not going. Let me just, sorry. Okay. Okay, so I just want to thank our presenters tonight so much for giving us all this information. It was so useful, and I've learned so much, and I'm sure everybody on this call has learned a lot. And again, you can go to safernj.org. And thank you all for joining us tonight, and have a great evening. Good night.